Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Now, we are joined by somebody trying to join right in the middle of my intro, which is, of course, Arwin, Eli, Chocolate Saiyan, Neil, Brian's Logic, 10th Man, Refracted Curvatures disappeared temporarily, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello, hello, good afternoon.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, people.
Good afternoon, good to have you all. Reasonably enthusiastic from Discord today. Good to see, very pleased. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
You can't see it.
It only exists. It only exists in the math, so there is no evidence for it.
Thanks, Rumpus.
You can't see it. It's there underneath the mirage.
Wait, it only exists in the math. Wait, so
Well,
how is math blocking boats in the distance again? Remind
math
me?
is. Yeah, I will. I will remind you. Math is given a different entity. It's called a thought experiment. So it exists in a thought experiment based on the math you can't use.
I especially like how Arwin's argument today is you can't see it. It's not just beyond the visible horizon. Whereas yesterday, our argument was entirely the opposite of that, which is you can see it, it's just below the physical horizon.
Eli, you're much noise.
Below.
Eli, you're causing a whole
being
bunch
covered
of
by a
background noise.
mirage.
Eli. Okay, then. Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved adjacent? Curved
Does
baseline?
not compute.
You try that again?
No,
That's like asking, can you point me at this straight line on this ball? Right? No,
Right.
there isn't one.
Right.
No, they used the sextant on the surface of the Earth, and their Earth is supposedly curved, which means you can't use the sextant from the surface of a curved Earth. However, when it comes to actually gaining the numbers and what you use the sextant for, they say we actually do it from the equatorial plane, so they cut the Earth in half, so it's a disk. So in reality, they are using it from the surface of the Earth. It's just the surface of the Earth is flat. But they want to say it's from the center of the Earth, which, of course, the sailor or navigator is never at the center of anything. He's at the surface of whatever he's using it at.
Any evidence of the R value, that be Earth radius?
It's derived from a flat plane. Right.
Nah.
Exactly.
Or
Perspective.
What?
What?
Yeah,
Perspective?
perspective. It's a
Perspective's
measurement of
not-
perspective.
Perspective's not an R value.
No, but the R value is a hijacking of perspective.
How
'Cause
so?
if you believe you live on a globe, as you move due south from Polaris, north of the equator, then as Polaris appears to drop in the sky, you have to accept that your belief means that perspective does not exist, and that the reason Polaris is dropping is because you're going backwards and down over a curve. But perspective cannot exist under those circumstances. So if you believe in the globe Earth, then you cannot believe that angular sizes and perspective of any kind, especially Polaris appearing to drop in the sky as you move south, you have to believe all that does not exist.
Do you think that's why we named the calculator the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking, Earth curve calculator?
Well, no,
Maybe.
it isn't why we called it that, but that is now another addition to the perspective hijacking aspect. At that particular point, while we might have appreciated that they just begged the question of R and even got people like Mick West to admit it, that doesn't alter the fact that we didn't know that R was derived from elevation angle measurements to Polaris. That perspective hijacking, we didn't really know when we named the calculator that. So I'm going to say no, Chocolate.
So this is the Super Saiyan level version of the perspective hijacking. That we've gotten down to the origins of the hijacking itself.
Oh, it makes
Ryan,
the title.
could you repeat that?
It makes the title far more true. That much I will agree with. Yes, the calling the curve calculator perspective hijacking is truer now than it ever was when it was labelled that in the first instance, because the R value itself that they beg the question of. Maybe we could get rid of the first part. The begging the question bit is also perspective hijacking, right? But I suppose they've got to have already begged that perspective hijacking bit to get there, so it doesn't need an alteration in the name or the long-winded label that I give it when I'm talking about it. That would be, as Chocolate said, the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator. But yeah, it's just truer now than it ever was.
Did you want me to repeat it, Neil?
How you get the R
Yeah.
value by hijacking perspective. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. If you see Polaris appearing to drop in the sky, or any other perspective effect as you move due south away from Polaris while you are traveling north of the equator, then you must believe that that perspective is not taking place. You're not seeing Polaris drop due to perspective. Angular sizes are not happening. There is no such thing as angular size. And all perspective effects are not real. What I mean by not real is that you're not seeing them. Everything you see as you move south from the GP point of Polaris, everything you see from that point, you must believe is only due to the function of you going backwards and down over the curve of a globe Earth, if you believe in the globe.
There is a mild physicality assumption bias in there, though, isn't there? I mean, although it might sound like an oxymoron, you would be better off calling it an apparent perspective effect, because unless you actually know what it is, or you can show an angular size reduction, which you can't, what you can show is a drop towards the horizon of the stars as you move away from them. Now, while that is agreed upon that it's akin to a perspective effect, we don't really know what they are. So I'm going to, without it hopefully being labelled a redundant terminology, an apparent perspective effect, if you will.
Isn't it an angle still?
The problem. Go on, George.
Isn't it still an angle? Going down towards the horizon or coming from the horizon up is still an angle, isn't it? Elevation or depression angle.
Yeah. So
Still
because
required a flat plane.
that's absolutely true. But what are we actually measuring? Okay, so we're measuring an elevation angle, and what are we seeing as we back away from it? We're seeing a drop in the elevation angle measurement. That would be a reduction in the number of degrees that you measure as you back away from Polaris. Okay. Now, as you back away from a lighthouse, it will also drop towards the horizon, but it'll also physically get smaller, won't it? But the stars and the sun and the moon and the other luminaries don't do that.
Yeah, but Nathan, you're missing something here. There's two. What you just said about apparent perspective. George came in, so I left George go. No, you're incorrect about that, because we're not measuring the height of Polaris. We're measuring the angular free space between Polaris and the horizon. So that free space is changing in angular size the same way as the top of the lighthouse and the base of the lighthouse. That area between them is the lighthouse, but that is changing in angular size.
Okay,
so you're not measuring the angular size of Polaris.
You're measuring the angular size between it and the horizon. So the angle between the horizon and the star reduces. Okay. I still don't like it. I just think it does have
problem. See, there's something.
It just has a mild hint of physicality assumption to it. Arwin's not backing me up though, so.
Well, it can't have because
I think
it's
it's
an
just
angular.
measuring its distance from Polaris.
Oh yeah,
GP.
what's the?
It
That's
requires a plane.
Check it out, Brian. That was me trying to lead you to do it, and George has done it for you. What would that distance be then? Only silence. You can get the distance to the GP with a clever bit of math. That's what you can get. The distance below it. But that distance across the land is the whole point of triangulating your position to find out where you are. Once you know where the star will be at a given time and you've measured that star's angle, then you can calculate where it'll be, the GP that is of the star, below it. But that doesn't tell you the distance to the star, so therefore it doesn't tell you that it's getting further away as it drops towards the horizon. Now, while I appreciate that would seem like the most obvious explanation, given that the position it's above is further away, and you can physically verify that, but it's still, for me, just that little step too far to start describing it in the star itself. Now, feel free to do that. I'm not going to ever object if you did it while in discussion, Brian, but I'm just saying what makes me uncomfortable about describing it specifically as a perspective effect at this stage.
Well, no, but see, let me finish my second part.
Okay.
But first of all, you're only measuring the angular free space between the horizon and the star you see in the sky, this being Polaris for this example. Secondly, all angular size measurements or angular measurements of any kind, whether it be elevation angles or an angular size measurement, they're all measurements of perspective, because nothing is in its actual position. The only time that Polaris is in its actual position for you is when it's at your 90 degrees. Same for any other celestial body. And at that point, you have no idea, you have no idea how high that is. You just know it's at your zenith. So every time you do any angular, whether it be an elevation angle measurement or an angular size measurement, that's a measurement of perspective. It can't not be, because nothing is its angular size. It always has an actual size or an actual height, as opposed to its angular height, which would be Polaris. That's all you're measuring with Polaris's angular height above the horizon. Or a lighthouse's angular size, let's just say, from a distance. But it's not its actual. You don't know its actual. You can find it out, but at the height of the lighthouse, but you won't be able to find out about Polaris. But for elevation angles, it doesn't matter how high the star is, because you're measuring its angular height in reference to the horizon. So it's always only a perspective measurement, or a measurement of perspective.
And that makes sense as to why, when we used to say perspective, like 5-6 years ago, they used to get so tight about it. Like, you can't say perspective. All you got is perspective. They would make fun of us for it, right? But when you find out that's literally the key, well, then that makes sense why y'all lost your minds about that. Until one day you want to come in here and be like, oh, but you guys forgot about perspective, Nathan. That was unorthodox. Hilarious.
What he didn't mention, and he should have mentioned, was the 90-degree angle. Because whatever angle you're going to measure to Polaris, no matter how far away you are, you're going to have to deduct that from the 90-degree in order to give you the distance. No. And that requires a flat plane.
No, I'm just talking about the perspective side of things, George. I did mention Polaris at your 90. Now, I'm just talking about, I have a presentation on this coming on how the globe's radius was formulated in the next couple of days. And I'll have that out in Nathan's in the next couple of days. It is, I'm not giving too much away, but I'm giving enough away. Basically, my point being is that the globe's radius, right, or any radii they claim, they all originated as perspective measurements over a flat plane. Can't do them without that. That was step one.
Any more on the R value? Any more for any more?
What R value?
Right on. The R value they took by measuring a flat plane.
At the best, you debunk the radius of the Earth.
Yeah, response to the Black Swan by Mr. Sensible about 2 years ago. But to be perfectly honest, even that is now redundant, isn't it? At best,
Yep.
you debunk
Oh,
the
yeah.
radius. It's like, well, where did the radius come from in the first place? Well, the radius came from a flat plane.
His statement shows that he didn't give it any thought whatsoever, because he didn't realize when he was making the statement, and I presume he doesn't realize now, that to change the radius of the globe Earth would mean that the globe Earth model would not fit what we see in the sky, because it has to fit what we see in the sky. And they made sure it did, because they made sure to use the angular height of Polaris as the baseline, unintended, to their radii, to the radius. So they
I've
made
been saying
sure
that for years,
if it,
Brian.
Yeah, yeah. If it fits, they have to make it fit. They have to make it fit the sky. Otherwise, they couldn't sell it to anyone. So anyone saying that the radius could be bigger, the globe Earth could be bigger or smaller, no, it has to be that exact size, because it has to match the observations of Polaris. It has to match the latitudes that Polaris gives us.
I meant I've been saying they just speak without thinking for years. And that's a prime example of it.
Well, if you wanted to skip past the using a flat Earth to get that angle measurement, there's a way to check it, and you could measure the horizon, and assuming it's a ball, and that horizon's a tangent point, you could just do some trig to figure out the radius of Earth if that were true, right?
No, you
That's
can't.
what they've done, Brian, isn't it?
Hold on, hold on.
Your point.
He's talking about Al-Biruni.
No, he's making. I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my summary understanding is, and I like it, because he's saying fundamentally, it is a derivative of the behavior of the skies, and if we're going to hijack perspective, turn it into curvature, then the behavior of the skies in of itself has limitations if you make those assumptions. So it is going to constrain your R value. You are limited. You can't tweak your R value, because it will no longer match with the skies. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's exactly it, Adam. They had to make sure that the R value was derived from flat Earth measurements of the sky to make sure that their globe matched what we see. Because, as you just said, if they changed the R value, made it bigger or smaller, then their model will not match the celestial sphere at any point.
I thought that was the whole point of the Black Swan, to show that the radius was.
Yeah, it is. That's the whole point. But there's obviously two methods of deriving an R value. One is the Al-Biruni method, which, thinking about it, is more of a confirmation. In other words, once you've derived your radius value by measuring the drop in angular height to Polaris as you back away from it and getting 1 degree for every 60 nautical miles.
Nautical miles.
Yeah,
nautical. Yeah.
I've started to get it right now. It's a 69 statute. Okay, well, once you've got that, then to confirm it as valid, because obviously that's only using the stars. Now, if you've not been told that that angle's been transposed down from the tool measuring a flat plane to the arc of the tool being the surface, in other words, you're moving around the arc of the tool because you're on a globe to change the angle, like you're rotating the protractor rather than actually measuring the angle. Well, once that's assumed and you don't know that, you could say, well, I know we're on a sphere, how can I confirm it? Well, I can confirm it by admittedly measuring a flat plane to get the height of the mountain, but if we ignore that bit, you could then derive it by dip angle measurement, which would be necessitated by a sphere Earth radius 3959. It would have a geometric limitation at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. So yes, although it started off with the Black Swan, in an order for a globe, it would be derive the R value from measurement to Polaris, and then confirm that you've got a sphere edge, as you suspected by the measurements to Polaris you now assume are on the arc of the tool rather than the flat plane you measured them from.
But Al-Biruni could never have done what he was claimed to have done, because the horizon he would have seen would never have matched what the globe Earth's geometric horizon from the maths. So he had to already have those maths. And what he did is he had, like, this is why he couldn't have done it, because refraction was supposedly not known then. So he would have had to add 7/6R to get any calculation based on the horizon he sees. Because when he goes up high, when you go up high, you're seeing more clearly an horizon at distance, and you will never see that horizon even be close to what it would need to be, what it would need to be if you were believing you were on a globe Earth, because that horizon would be so far away from what it would need to be for that height for a globe Earth. It would never work. I know this myself. I have been, and I've seen every time for the past 7 years, any of our opposition come at us with observations, especially when they're from high up. They always have to add as much 7/6R as possible, because the horizon never ever matches what they would expect it to match on a globe. They tried to do it from low down, kind of close to the waterline observations at times, and they were just messing around with horizontals and trying to claim that that was a geometric horizon. But when you go up high, like he's claimed to have done, then that horizon, you won't be looking so horizontally through a lot of different refractive effects. You will be seeing an horizon that where it'll be. My point is that the horizon that he saw was always going to be way further from his position than it would need to be for him to believe he was on a globe. So if he did use that horizon, then the globe he'd be claiming would be way bigger than
Tony's,
what it is.
texted me. He says, I've got to make a point. So it's in relation to this one. He says, address this point for me. And then he threatens me and says, I'm listening. So there you go, Tony. When it comes to the horizon, they claim there are two horizons, the geometric horizon and the refracted horizon. From this day forth, the refracted horizon shall now be known as the reified horizon, as opposed to the refracted.
Hold on a minute. The globe doesn't claim two horizons. Anti-flat earthers do. Why are we bringing 7/6R into this?
That's correct.
This
That's
is
another.
why-
I'm glad you brought that
That's
up.
the point.
Exactly. Sorry to disagree with your reading out Tony's question, but there isn't a second horizon to justify it as a reified horizon. The horizon in the begging the question proof of anything perspective hijacking earth curve maths is geometric. It's the limitation that used to block the Isle of Man. It's the limitation physically blocking boats and buildings. It's the one calculated to be blocking skylines in the distance. That's the physical limitation. That's earth curve. And as you've just said, John, there is no refracted earth curve edge horizon. That's an anti-flat earth made up in contradiction with the actual globe earth maths assertion. It's not a globe assertion. The globe assertion is the horizon's earth curve and boats will go over it.
Yeah, in fact, that's like kind of what spurred a lot of conversation over the weekend, including the conversation I had in the video that I posted. Because really, I was looking for anyone who would look at this globe earther. Kind of reminds me of Professor Dave, and he's basically telling this flat earther that the horizon behind her it looks like a green screen of a beach. That horizon behind her is probably about 3 miles away. And how does he know that? What informs him of that? Well, that's the formula that determines how far away the horizon is based on the radius of the Earth and your height above the Earth.
I'm struggling as to why Tony's reifying. That's what the globe model does. It reifies that horizon into the leading edge. They say it's refracted, but the purpose of them saying it's refracting is so that they can reify it as into the globe model, that it is the edge of their sphere. It is physical, even though it's not.
The ones,
Right, but
it's the ones who debate it.
But once it's refracted,
Say-
it's no longer geometric. So you say they refract it so they can reify it back into the physical geometric horizon that's been refracted. But the moment they refract it, it's not geometric anymore. So it's a paradox the moment they refract it. They can't get the geometric horizon if the horizon they claim they see is refracted. If they say it's refracted, it means there's a bent line to it, which completely destroys all globe Earth geometry.
Yeah, agree. But
So
their
I think
defense
it's-
is bally, though, isn't it? It's not anti-flat earthy still. I think that's the defense I'm putting in. That it's
So
still
why-
a ball claim,
so
not
that's
an
what-
anti-flat earth claim.
So that's
So
what we
why-
have to point out is the stark difference between what Eli was saying, a regular normie glober who thinks he knows something about something, and then the ones who choose to debate this, they have two different stories about how this is supposed to happen. Right? You got to point that out.
Yeah, Nathan, when it uploads, which should be in a couple of seconds here, could you play the clip of this TikTok video? Again, TikTok. Yeah.
Whose is it?
Well, the guy's name is Mini Minute on
it's not-
TikTok, and I
it's
got a
not-
screen grab of it.
It's not my video.
So a
It's
screen
not- it's-
recording of it.
Yeah, I mean I can, but it's not mine. So I risk. Let me just shout out Godzilla. Work is over 20 miles away, and gas is $2.40 a litre. Thank God for Earth Curve. I just put it in neutral and coast down to work. Okay.
That's good.
I just want people to. You don't even have to show it. I just want them to hear him tell her that the horizon is geometrically.
We were really on a ball.
Or the
Why can we
horizon,
not find
yeah.
the curvature anywhere?
Well, Jersey Shore, that's because the ball's really fucking big. You can't see the curvature of the Earth because you're not above it, you're on it. But if you want to split hairs, this horizon point, which you have in your picture, is probably about 3.5 miles away.
Right, that's all I need. So yeah. So he's claiming Earth sphere edge physical blockage at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. This crazy hippie. Well, okay, crazy hippie. The problem with that is that we've debunked it in 2020. If the Earth was a sphere, radius 3959, as depicted in this diagram, then, as you claim, every distance to horizon would be 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet as laid down in the Earth curve maths. However, the distance to the horizon in the Black Swan and many others like it is beyond the geometric limitations of a sphere edge horizon at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, as you're showing here. So what he's claiming, really fucking far? No. If you want to say it's really far away, then why is it being claimed to be the horizon? So that's a non sequitur. You then debunk your own non sequitur by bringing up the Earth curve maths and pointing out that the Earth curve maths claims it's the horizon. Well, that horizon that physically has boats falling over it. Yeah, this crazy hippie thinks boats fall over the horizon. What a crazy hippie. But we've debunked that because the horizon's miles beyond where it should be, with boats falling over it, blocking this lighthouse in your diagram in Muppet vision that we don't see. Anybody else got anything to add to that?
You hear the smugness in his voice as he describes this to this girl, right? But the funny part is that if he were to take this up with the current council of people who are running around debating it, he would have many problems with what he said.
Let's call him out. What's his name?
He's not thinking. That's what it is. He's just speaking.
No, he is thinking. He is thinking about
Really?
the globe model. The globe model, the way it's presented to the masses, right?
Right.
That's what he's
the same way we
presenting.
see it.
No, I
Exactly.
agree with that. But
This
is he
man
not
has
thinking?
obviously never seen a black swan before.
Most people haven't. That's the point, because they've tried to convolute the conversation so much that people disengage before they even understand what the argument is. That's
Yeah,
what's
but
going on.
Eli-
Anyway, the guy's name is Mini Minute Man on TikTok.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mini
but
Minute
listen.
Man. You're an idiot.
He says
You're an idiot. You
Yeah,
don't
he's-
understand how we see things because the diagram you've presented seems to be depicting the side of the observer's head. So, crazy hippie, where in unholy hell do you ever get this view where you see the side of your own head observing a lighthouse? You don't. That's a hijacking of perspective, a removal of perspective. So, you're an idiot. You don't understand how the horizon's formed, and you think that when you see a horizon, you see a side-on view of your own head. Further to that, as I've just stated, we've debunked your assertion of Earth curve being something for boats to fall over in the distance. Crazy bloody idiots with their boats falling over edges. Yeah, we debunked that. It's beyond its limitations in geometry, so it can't be a physical leading edge to block your boats and buildings.
Come on, let's Neil. Neil, come on, you go.
I just want to say he's not thinking, because first he's saying Earth is so effing big, but then he's saying start with the horizon that's only 3,000 miles away. Is something not clicking?
We've got to time travel, dude. We need a because this is 4 or 5 years out of date. This guy has just fell in. No, he sounds like a normie because he's just citing what he's been told by Neil. I mean, this is a Bill Nye one, isn't it? Really, he's totally.
He's not out of date though. That's the beautiful. This is how we want people to address it, so we can say, yeah, that's wrong. That's why the discussion is over. You know,
I meant out of date with the flat Earth debate, but he's up to date with the ball claims. He's that's what I'm saying. He's there. He's attending Ball Church and citing what the priests tell him.
Right.
This is not an anti-flat Earth.
Right. What we're saying to the anti-flat earthers, and I think this is the sentiment that Eli's trying to get across, Adam, is that no, he is actually just your average ball-believing clown who doesn't know any better, but he knows how to parrot off the really entry-level globe belief to an audience. That's what he knows. Now, obviously, if he'd have discussed it with anybody of any intellect on the flat Earth side of the discussion, he'd appreciate pretty quickly that you can't get away with just claiming that boats fall over an edge of Earth. You'll get laughed at. Boats falling over an edge. We debunked that in 2020.
Yeah, notice he didn't say their magical word, refraction, even once.
Well, that's
He's
good.
never
though.
heard of it, obviously, because he doesn't need to have heard of it, because he's never seen a black swan before.
The minute he says refraction, he's going against the globe claim.
A lot of background noise.
And that's what, Eli, you got to mute.
Sorry.
And that's exactly why he didn't say it, because he's going by the standard globe claims of the horizons over there, and that's what it is, because we live on a ball. He's not going against that. He's actually fighting for that. Unlike these guys who enter this debate and have to change that and flip it to their own narrative in order to make their debate work. It has.
And
why can't he have?
And we gotta
6R.
Yeah, that's non sequitur. Because and I say that's non sequitur because what does light have to do with an obstruction of light?
Nothing.
Well, it's part of their claim, though.
Right, but it's a non sequitur claim. Because they're saying, well, I'm supposed to interpret this 7/6R as, okay, the hill's not there, it's actually there instead. Nah, son.
But the whole geometric, I'm going to deal with more bit now in a minute when Nathan is ready. I'm going to present where their radius came from. Their whole geometric horizon claim, that's all comes back to their radius claim. You know, that's what it is. It's like us even arguing about their geometric horizon and we don't see it is even pointless after I present this. I think it is anyway.
Well, it's not pointless because they're heretics the minute they say that their geometric horizon is refracted.
I'm not being argumentative. I'm asking why. Why? Because I don't see that as them going against their own rhetoric. It's a strap-on that they add in, but it's still part of the mainstream rhetoric. 7/6R to me. It's not. For
the target, not the horizon.
Right. That's with respect to the horizon. 7/6R.
You can't refract the horizon. The geometry depends on you having a straight line to it as a tangent point. So the moment you bend that straight line tangent point in the geometry falls apart. So we've been saying it since 2020. The moment you refract what is required to be a straight line, that's a tangent line, it's game over.
I agree, but the point I'm making is that's what we did to the globe model, wasn't? That still sits in the 7/6R. Still, for me, sits with a standard ball believer, not an anti-flat earther. They would still, you can still have this guy come back and say, the reason it doesn't match up is because we've got 7/6R. Now, that there is then the Arwinian paradox of it, which is what the black swan destroys. But I think 7/6R sits in ball rhetoric, not anti-flat earth.
No, it isn't. Sorry, I've got to correct you. Sorry. No, stop. That's incorrect, right? While you might be able to dig out anti-flat earther Andrew Thomas Young claiming that we draw a line of sight to the visible apparent horizon, that's not, that doesn't jive. You can't have Andrew Thomas Young claim to be mainstream rhetoric. He isn't. He's an anti-flat earther because he's describing drawing a straight line to a horizon we can't see. His diagram's got two horizons. It's farcical. Now, if you go to any Earth curve calculator, you won't find a claim to be... The calculators are claiming to prove Earth curve. They're called Earth curve calculator. So if you've suddenly got it saying, well, actually, we've got two horizons, the geometric one we're trying to prove with this maths that blocks the boats and buildings, and one that's non-geometric, not Earth curve, not blocking anything, refracted. You won't find that in an Earth curve mathematics calculator because it doesn't exist. It's not current globe Earth rhetoric to refract the horizon. Quite the contrary.
No, you're right. You're right, because Mick West adds it in, doesn't he, after we've done him? It was that's why he did the rumpus, because it wasn't in there first. Now, Thank corrected it. It wasn't part of the ball rhetoric, even when Mick West did his fudge. It's only upon response to flat earthers that they then build it in so that you can have a refracted 7/6 refracted horizon. That's added in years later, isn't it?
Correct.
So, yeah,
so
I'm wrong. Yeah.
The added in 7/6R refracted horizon, that's not, and I quote the rumpus, refracted with respect to the horizon. And that's what the target is, because you're moving the target with respect to the geometric physical limitation that you're going to base the refraction value on. So the R value leads you to the tangent point, and the refracted value refracts the target with respect to the horizon. That's what the maths does. So you haven't got a refracted horizon, we've only got one horizon. And your horizon's physical and geometric in the Earth curve maths. That's what you've got to claim. That's what this dude's claiming. This dude's talking about a physical limitation for boats to fall over. And he's got it depicted on screen. It's this point, the tangent point.
This, what I'm going to show now, it may not... Go on, Eli.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Brian. I just wanted to say, even if let's say, okay, fine, let's accept your non-understanding of how this works and say that you can extend the horizon a little bit, because that's what they say. Oh, look at this paper here. It says that the horizon can appear or extend to this distance instead. Well, everything that you would find, you understand their parameters, and every horizon distance measurement is beyond those parameters. Or every time it's beyond those parameters, you don't have an argument. With the black swan, that's exactly the case that they have. They can't even point to anything that would try to describe what's going on in the black swan. They don't have any refraction claim, really.
Well, when it got to that point now, if this dude was on, actually with us live, and he said, okay, right, the horizon is, as described in the Earth curve maths, it's at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That puts it at 3 miles in this picture, based on the maths. Okay, so we've got a physical limitation according to you and your maths that asserts that the horizon's physical and boats are falling over it. Okay, let's have a little look at your maths. There's an R value being utilised in this maths. It's automatically assumed at 39.59 miles. Where did you get it? That would be the next question. And what's he going to answer? I would assume that this guy wouldn't have the slightest idea where he got his R value from. He knows where to find the curve maths, but as for where the R value in the curve maths is being used to beg the question of a sphere Earth blocking things in the distance, he wouldn't know. But we know. And we also know how it's been derived from a flat plane. So the R value used to claim that the horizon's a physical leading edge of a sphere blocking boats and lighthouses into the distance with its physicality was derived by angle measurements taken from a flat plane. So this guy's model that he's talking about originated as a flat plane. That diagram that he had on screen, that was taken from a flat plane. So what's he got? He's got his assumption of a model that used a flat plane. Shout out to Retro Bill, who says, just bear with me a second, whoever's come off mute. On a merry-go-round in the night, Coriolis was shaken with fright. Despite how he walked, 'twas like he was stalked by some friend always pushing him right. What a lovely limerick, Retro Bill. Thank you very much.
Well, I got a question about that.
Hang on. John, if I don't get to do this now, it won't happen.
Go on, Brian. It's been on screen for ages.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mind. I'm not trying to force it. If you're happy talking about what you're talking about, Grant. But I'm just saying because it won't happen because the show will end.
Well, I think your point addresses what Nathan's just about to say.
Yeah, it's a good segue. That's why. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I don't have the diagrams ready for this. I didn't get them together, but just because we're talking so much about it, I said now we're just going to do it. So it's going to be all reading. There'll be some parts of this that won't make any sense at the start, and but I had to put them in there to relay them in. You may not even tweak them, right? But just if you do, there's a reason for them. Okay, this is where the globe out radius came from. Flat out radii, right? The heliocentric claim of 3 radii. First one, the polar radius of 3950 miles. Second, the equatorial radius of 3963 miles. And third, what I term the necessity radius of 3959 miles. The real radius is 3958.09491 miles accurate. The real radius is a back calculation of the actual radius of 3439.49 miles nautical. This radius is the radius of a circle that is 21,600 nautical miles in circumference. 21,600 nautical miles broken into 4 equal parts will be 4 times 5,400 nautical miles. 90 degrees as minutes of degree will be 5,400 minutes of degree. There is 5,400 minutes of degree between 90 degrees and 0 degrees. There is 5,400 nautical miles between the GP point of Polaris and the equator line. The distance of 5,400 nautical miles between these 2 points is measured using elevation angles and their corresponding zenith angles. This measurement requires certain pre-assumptions to be actualized. First, that both the observer's zenith and the zenith from the GP point be parallel to one another. Second, that the baseline of this elevation angle measurement will be the surface of Earth. Third, that the Earth has an underlying horizontal baseline as all elevation angles are Pythagorean right-angled triangles. Fourth, that all angular measurements are measurements of perspective as they are always performed in reality. Fifth, that our natural perspective view dictates what angular measurements we get, as all angular measurements are measurements of perspective. Sixth, that angular height or size is not actual height or size, as angular size is a function of perspective. Seventh, that the height of any celestial body, including Polaris, is unnecessary for us to know when we are looking to use a celestial body's GP point to formulate a geometric horizontal distance to that same GP point. So to formulate a globe outer radius value, they had to start with a 21,600 nautical mile flat Earth diameter measurement. They began by using the 5,400 minutes of degree that are found between 90 degrees and 0 degrees, which are measured between parallel zeniths. These minutes of degree are measured off the multiplication by 60 of the zenith angle. The zenith angle is the corresponding angle to the starting elevation angle. The elevation angle is a right-angled triangle that is always less than 90 degrees. The zenith angle is determined by the subtraction of the elevation angle from 90 degrees. To gain a horizontal length and distance to the adjacent baseline of the elevation angle, the zenith angle is multiplied by 60. If the zenith angle is 90 degrees, then this means that the elevation angle is 0 degrees, and the horizontal length and distance of the adjacent baseline is then 5,400 nautical miles, as we will have counted 5,400 minutes of degree. All minutes of degree are converted one for one into nautical miles. All nautical mile distances are horizontal distances determined by the length of the adjacent side of the elevation angle, which is always a Pythagorean right angle triangle. So to get to a globe Earth radius value, they first had to use the observed and measured flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris, which culminated in a horizontal 5,400 nautical mile distance between the GP point of Polaris and the equator line. They then multiplied this 5,400 nautical mile distance by 4 to get 21,600 nautical miles, as 5,400 corresponds to 90 degrees, and 4 times 90 degrees is 360 degrees. So essentially, they are hijacking not just known flat Earth measurements, but also the arc scale. As all angular measurements are measurements of perspective, any hijacking of these measurements is a direct hijacking of perspective itself, which is exactly what heliocentrism did. As they took flat Earth elevation angle measurements that were performed using the arc scale of the protractor, etc., and used these measurements to create a false circle of some 21,600 nautical miles in circumference. They then divided this 21,600 nautical mile circle by 3.14 to gain the diameter calculation of 6878.9808917197452223. It's important I read that out. This figure was then halved as a way of divining a radius value to their 21,600 nautical mile circle, which gave them a value of 3439.490445859872611. This figure was then converted to statute miles, which gave them a figure of 3958.0949152570700064. So you're starting to see where their radius came from. 3958.0949 is the real globe Earth radius, as the polar radius of 3950 and the equatorial radius of 3963 and the averaged radius, what I called the necessity radius earlier, of 3959 miles, does not work with the latitude and longitude grid. You see, this is the problem. None of these other three radii here, 3959, the 3959 as is often quoted by QE and used in the Black Swan, the 3963 and the 3950, the equatorial and polar radius, none of them match the latitude and longitude grid. The one up here, 3958.0949, that's the only one that matches it, and the reason that matches it is because it's conversion from nautical miles, and the nautical miles is back in the nautical mile radius, which is not, there's no such thing, but there it is, which was a conversion from that to this, and that's how they began to formulate their 3958.0949 actual real globe Earth radius that doesn't exist. But anyway, I'll move on. The reason they don't work with the latitude and longitude grid is because they are not directly converted from nautical miles. So consequently, they are not directly converted from minutes of degree. The 3959 mile radius claim is a rounding off up the way of the actual 3958.0949 radius. And this is done as a way of hiding truth. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that most people think that the conversion from nautical miles to statute miles is a 1.151 ratio. This is not true. The actual ratio is 1.1508 and not 1.151. So why is this important? It's important as it removes the connection between flat nautical mile measurements via elevation angles and the globe Earth's radius claims. But the plot thickens as we also have two more radius claims, and none of them mathematically match the latitude and longitude grid either. We have a polar radius of 3950 miles and an equatorial radius of 3963 miles that seem to have come from nowhere. Of these two numbers, the polar 3950 should match the nautical mile radius measurement of 21,600 nautical miles circumference, but it doesn't. So neither this 3950 claim or the other 3963 claim will mathematically match the latitude and longitude grid. But they do have a purpose, but just not a purpose mathematically that is immediately apparent. If we add, this is the part that's going to stick in people, and I have to just report the truth. It is what it is. If we add 3950 and 3963 together, we get 7913. These are the two that's the polar and equatorial radius claims added together, comes up with 7913. And if we convert this number from statute miles to nautical miles, we get the figure of 6876.208996356306816. It's important I read all of that. And if we add these numbers together, we get 99. And if we add 9 and 9 together, we get 18. And if we add 1 and 8 together, we get the number 9. The number 9 turns up a lot within heliocentrism, but it also turns up a lot within a lot of flat Earth related topics. For instance, the Thoth mile, the latitude and longitude grid, 360 degrees, 270 degrees, 180 degrees, 90 degrees, 5,400 minutes of degree, etc. There are many examples. The reason for this is not important right now, but what is important is that we understand that heliocentrism seems to be hijacking numerology along with flat Earth measurements to make their radial claims. That's not something I'm trying to force. That's just the way it is. There was no connection to 3950 polar radius that they claim and the 3963 equatorial radius that they've been claiming. None of them two in any way will mathematically fit the latitude and longitude grid. They don't. Only the radius that I formulated that is close to the 3959, or the 3959 is a rounding off up the way of. That is the actual statute mile radius of the globe. But that had to be converted from a nautical mile Mach radius. You can't have a nautical mile radius, but that's what they had to do because they had to use the 21,600 mile diameter measurement, which is what you would have across a flat plane using the longitude lines. They had to use that and make a circle out of it. This circle went through the North Pole. So Perfect. The last part is Eratosthenes. I just threw this in because it's important. Eratosthenes measured part of a flat Earth diameter between Alexandria and Siam. With the horizontal distance he was claimed to measure accumulating at 500 modern-day statute miles. He performed this measurement using a well as the sun's GP point at a certain known point of the year. From his position, he measured an elevation angle to the sun of 82.7586 degrees. And 82.7586 degrees subtracted from 90 degrees equals 7.2414 degrees. This 7.2414 degrees was Eratosthenes' zenith angle, which he then multiplied by 60 to gain a horizontal distance along the adjacent side of his right triangle of 434.48 minutes of degree, which he then converted into 434.48 nautical miles of horizontal distance along the surface of Earth. 500 miles statute converts to 434.4881205.83616 miles nautical. So this is essentially what Eratosthenes did, with the exception of him not using statute miles. The heliocentrists also hijacked him and his flat Earth diameter measurements. The end.
Awesome. Just a couple of things. I mean, I'm glad you're saying you don't want the numerological conclusion to be forced down anybody's throat, because you'll have to go somewhere with me to convince me. Not necessarily just through ignorance, but for a whole number of reasons. But you didn't necessarily focus on that too much. The other thing is, it's just rounding up, as opposed to rounding up the way. I think you dropped that in for humorous effect, though. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I knew you'd have a laugh at that.
I loved it. Rounding up the way. I did laugh.
I like the fact that it was written down. I mean, I've heard it many times, but yeah, I heard you say it, and I went to the slide, Brian, and to see it actually there, beautiful, mate. I love that.
That's exactly what I did. I heard him say it, and I glanced across to see if it was in the presentation. He'd actually written it down, and he had. Very good. No, good. I'm glad you've actually dedicated that. I hope you do also turn it into your own video, maybe jazz it up a bit with a couple of images. It doesn't need many, but that's brilliant. I mean, this is the first time it's actually been dedicated to tape, to my knowledge, in terms of the long-winded explanation for how your radius values derive from angle measurements from a flat plane. And Brian's just laid it out for you in the most detailed way I've seen done so far. Excellent work, Brian. Thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Nathan.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you,
brilliant.
It can't. That is where it came from. That it came from flat Earth elevation angles to Polaris, because as I said earlier, I hadn't really got this fully finished, but I said that I go along with it because I had added in earlier that their radius has to match what we view in the sky, but it also has to match the latitude and longitude grid. It has to match that, and that's why their radius had to be what I showed earlier. There's no other way. That's the number it has to be. I'll see if I go back up to it there.
But that's why I've just put it on screen, but that's why I did that picture. Because you shared that presentation a while back with us. And I know it was a slip of the tongue, dueling radii. But that is the point. We do have a battle here.
Yeah, but their dual radii is the polar and equatorial radius that I showed had a numerological connection to, because those radius don't fit anywhere mathematically. They don't fit with the latitude and longitude grid. They don't fit with anything. Like the latitude and longitude grid can't work if they have those dual on their globe. It can't work if they have a polar radius of 3950 miles and an equatorial radius of 3963 miles. It doesn't work. It has to be a continuous scale. Like there has to be 16 nautical miles per degree, and it can't be 16 nautical miles per degree if the sphere is not a perfect sphere with a radius of 3958 point. I don't know where it's at the going. 39. Where is it? 3958.040949. It has to have that to match the latitude and longitude grid, because the latitude and longitude grid is formulated from elevation angles to Polaris. So it all comes back to, it has to match what we view in the sky, and that all started, the baseline for all that was elevation angles to Polaris. It has to match what we view Polaris doing as we move north towards its GP point or south away from its GP point. And that's why that 3958.0949 is their actual statute mile radius.
I'm going to read out a quick super chat from Retro Bill. He says, there was once a fly on the wall. For months he would not fall. His feet were stuck, or was it just luck? Does gravity miss things so small? Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. But with that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Programming streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. A huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, hit the thanks button after the video's finished, and all that good stuff. Another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Programming stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!